Today's message is entitled Buckets, Pitchers, and the Theory of Relativity. All right, if you brought your Bibles, open up to Matthew chapter 25, verses 31 to 40. All right, if you don't have a Bible, it's okay. The scripture should be on your sheet. If you're watching online, you can print off the sheet from the website. If you're watching from YouTube, go to the website. It's better. All right, Matthew 25, 31 to 40. When the Son of Man comes in his glory, and all of his angels with him, then he will sit on the throne of his glory, and all the nations will be gathered before him, and he will separate one from another, just as a shepherd separates the sheep from the goats. He will put the sheep on his right and the goats on his left. Then the king will say to those on his right, "Come, you who are blessed by my Father, inherit the kingdom prepared for you from the foundation of the world. For I was hungry, and you gave me something to eat. I was thirsty, and you gave me something to drink. I was a stranger, and you took me in. I was naked, and you clothed me. I was sick, and you took care of me. I was in prison, and you visited me." Then the righteous will answer him, "Lord, when did we see you hungry and feed you, or thirsty and give you something to drink? When did we see you as a stranger and take you in, or without clothes and clothe you? When did we see you sick or in prison and visit you?" And the king will answer them and say, "I assure you, whatever you did for one of the least of these brothers of mine, you did for me." All right, if you talk to enough people, you're going to find somebody who's got a bucket list, right? You know, the list of things they want to accomplish or try before they kick the bucket, right? The list is always made up of experiences they've not yet had, all right? And it's compiled with this idea that upon completion, they will have done something of significance with their days on the planet, right? For some, it's about a legacy, all right? What are they going to leave behind? Others, it's just this adrenaline rush, the stuff that they want to get done, they want to try. Yet for others, like my wife, who says the last remaining item on her bucket list, all right, is to, all right, her word, catch a newborn baby, all right, be the first one to touch that brand new life, all right? People like this have got a unique set of things in their bucket altogether. As harmless as it appears, right, and as interesting as the ensuing conversations can end up being, the whole concept got me to thinking. And I came to this conclusion that maybe we should try and approach things from a different angle, all right? Instead of pursuing things that we've never done, maybe we should start looking for ways to express our appreciation for things that we've never had to endure. All right, now some of you are thinking that's kind of an odd perspective, right? But I guess it's all relative. Do you know what that means when somebody says, "Oh, it's just relative"? Do you get this? All right? You could ask a lot of people. You can go out in town and ask people about relativity, and some of them might include something about Albert Einstein, right? Some pontification about E equals mc squared. But when it comes to really explaining the definition of relativity, all right, the waters get a little murky, don't they? All right? I'm going to see today if I can give you a new place to swim. All right? I have heard a lot of really good examples of relativity in my life. Some appropriate, some not so much, right? But today, if you'll let me, I want to give you some analogies that in an attempt to give you a usable definition of this concept of relativity. And then hopefully make some point about bucket lists, all right? Fair enough? You ready? All right. Relativity. Sit in a dentist chair. The drill screaming as it bores into your tooth with such intensity your brain starts to itch, right? You been there? And a minute can seem like an hour, all right? But if you sit in your dream car on a warm summer day with a tank full of gas, no particular place to be, an hour disappears in a minute. It's all relative. Are you following me? Okay. Relativity. Walk all the way back to your car in your bare feet across the sand on a really hot summer day. And 15 minutes becomes a week, right? You been there? All right, but if you put your feet in the hot sand while sitting on the beach on vacation in the Caribbean, a week disappears in about 15 minutes. It's all relative. Do you see this? Look, relativity is your subjective perspective. All right? Your personal view of things, the way it appears from your seat in the stadium. You understand? All right? Relativity is the experience that you are having, all right, and how that experience impacts your life. Now, why am I saying all this, and what does it got to do with a bucket list? The bucket list is a list of things that people want to do, right? Things, experiences they want to have, right, before they die. Experiences that they want to have, right? You get this? All right. Have you ever considered, let's look at it this way. If we know that these are things that people want to have, all right, first I want to say that I'm not suggesting that anybody who has dreams and aspirations is a selfish pig, right? All right, I'm not saying that. But I am wanting you to look at your life and say, what message does my life communicate to somebody else's perspective? All right? Because if your life is observed to exist as just the accomplishment of chores and tasks, of responsibilities and obligations, and a bucket of things you hope to do before you take a dirt nap, I'd say that your cereal box is missing the prize, right? That's just fiber, farts, and no fun. Although I guess that could be relative too, right? Listen, it's so easy to get caught up in the rat race mentality. On one hand, the average mature adult, all right, is conscientious about responsibilities and obligations. We make time for some relationships and a little recreation to try to round out life a bit, right? To keep on keeping on. But if this is all that we do, then I'd say that the trail of breadcrumbs that we have left, that's always supposed to lead back to the safety of home, has now been replaced with directions to the wolf's house. All right, listen, this is where relativity comes into play. And this, I'm telling you, if it hasn't already for you, this is where this message gets extremely squirrely. So if you're not going to pay attention, you're going to get lost. All right, are you ready? Think relativity. Now, if we choose to do so, all right, and let me just say, some people have made a career out of this, all right? But if we choose to do so, we can visit our past and we can recount to everyone who's dumb enough to sit and listen about every difficulty, ordeal, every trial, every problem that has happened to us, right? If we walk up and down this side of memory lane, it becomes very easy to associate the circumstances of our past with our circumstances of now. And when we do this, if people want to interact with us, they've got to be willing to come visit us at the corner of Guess What Happened to Me Road and 100 Years Ago Boulevard. Do you understand what I'm saying? All right, listen, too many people are missing out on a really good meal today because they're spending so much time complaining about the plate full of yesterday's unacceptable lunch. All right, listen, even if we haven't turned our occasional excursion to yesteryear into a permanent, full-blown relocation, all right, when we do go there, the only thing we focus on is what happened to us. All right, if we go there with frequency and we get real comfortable, we will begin associating, right, the wretchedness of the past with the reality of our now, but not without consequences. Right? In today's world, it's an all too common practice for people to take the negative experiences of their past and use it as an excuse to be defective and unproductive in their now. Look, I'm not going to say that living on this rotten planet does not produce scars and baggage in people's lives. Look, I've got plenty of both in mind. However, many people have chosen to take those negative circumstances of the past and use it to influence them in a positive way. Look, we've got the choice. We can choose to let the negative things of our past, all right, be an excuse to just be a victim. Or we can use it to energize our own little battle cry for our own personal little revolt. All right, use it as weapons against the very enemy who tried to derail us, if not destroy us, when they invaded our life with all that garbage. Look, in the same way, it affects those who are off in the kitchen making popcorn for another rerun of My Poor Pathetic Past. All right, listen, this approach also shapes our choices of now and the future, but with drastically different results. All right, are you seeing what I'm saying? All right, when the focus is on only what has happened to us, then predictions about now and the future become this logical progression. Okay, blah, 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 blah. Enough of this stuff. What's the bottom line? The bottom line is this. We've got to leave the past in the past. Stop burning vacation days going to visit because nobody new has moved into the neighborhood since the last time you were there, and it'll never have anything new to say to you. And the reality is this: if and when we finally decide to voluntarily abandon some of this baggage that we drag around as an excuse for the way that we behave and the choices that we justify, even for 5 minutes, then we spend that time trying to add experiences to our bucket, hoping to satisfy our disenchanted life with some task that's supposed to make us feel significant. All right, listen. It's time to get beyond ourselves and these little universes in which we spend so much time and take so much for granted. Here's a thought, and this is where relativity starts to really take effect. Bucket lists, all right? This itemization of things that we have yet to experience, all right? Have you ever thought about making a list of things that you've never had to experience or endure ever? And let that affect your current and future choices. What? Right? Listen, if we understand that living mentally in the past, dwelling on all that negative garbage, right, it produces negative issues in our now and in our future. Look, can we just decide right now, choose to change our subjective perspective and allow the things that haven't happened to us to make a difference positively in somebody else's life? Okay, what does that look like? How do I know when I got there? I want you to close your eyes for just a second. I'm going to ask you one question, but you need to be in a place where only you can answer this honestly. When I ask you to envision your personal worship time, are there ever instances when you leave those times physically tired, worn out from all the effort it took to submit completely? All right, you can look up here. Now, I don't know how you answer that question behind the door of your heart, but let me just say this to you. In our personal worship time before God, we should be doing whatever it takes to submit everything there is for whatever He asks. All right, now if you're one of those kind that are thinking, uh-oh, here's where he starts to play the organ music and pass the basket and asking us to dig deep, look, just politely, quietly turn it off if you're watching it, or get up and excuse yourself and go get in line at Cracker Barrel because you're not ready to hear the rest of this. All right, the rest of you who are going to stay, listen. If you're not having a regular personal worship time, right? Or if you are, and you show up without intending to relinquish and offer it all, right? As much as this may make you mad, you're just kidding yourself, right? Because there's a lot of people who spend a lot of time in the complimenting God aspect of worship. All right, look, this is great. It's necessary. It's an important part, but it's only part. If you're showing up regularly for worship, but it's not showing any forward progress, it's not getting any deeper, then I cannot suggest more strongly to you that you look at the submission part of your worship. Your worship experience will never move forward until complete submission is equal to the respect factor that you offer. You see, God's idea, God's proposal, His paradigm is based on obedience first. The respect will come out of a submitted heart and a submitted life. Every day, without failure, you should begin your day asking your Father, pleading with Him to lead you by His Spirit so that you submit completely, you worship authentically, and you follow obediently. When you get there, worship becomes a pursuit. All right? Listen, if you haven't successfully gathered this yet, you need to uncover that way that God created you to worship. All right, there's more than one way to worship. There's more than one way to make that connection, but there's only one way for you to authentically connect and be submitted. When you get there, then what's left is to throw yourself into it, working every day to make it somehow a better offering than it was the day before, submitting everything you have and everything you are and everything that He will ever allow you to be for whatever He asks as soon as He asks it. You see now what I meant by saying, do you leave your worship time tired? Do you physically feel from all the work that it took to submit completely? All right, is it a big order? Yeah, it is. But listen, do you seriously expect to approach the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords to present an offering that costs you little and contains even less of you and expect that relationship and that interaction to grow? Now listen, I don't say this to discourage you. I say it to encourage you, to educate you that worship is a pursuit. I wish somebody had told me this years ago. I would have been working harder and sooner with the right expectations. I never want to tell God anything. I never want to say anything to Him that I don't mean. So as a result, every single day of my life, I have to force myself intentionally, obediently, I have to force myself to walk down that mental road of giving up this life that God has assembled around me piece by piece. If you've ever walked that road, right, you know what I'm talking about. You know how it takes it out of you. If you're not experiencing this, let me give you directions to a different road. How do you know when you get to the right place? Matthew 7, 13 and 14. Go in through the narrow gate. The gate to destruction is wide, and the road that leads there is easy to follow. A lot of people go through that gate, but the gate to life is very narrow. The road that leads there is so hard to follow that only a few people find it. All right, I like the Message paraphrase of this. It says it a little differently, but it communicates the same message. Don't look for shortcuts to God. The market is flooded with surefire, easygoing formulas for a successful life that can be practiced in your spare time. Don't fall for that stuff, even though crowds of people do. Listen, the way to life, to God, is vigorous and requires total attention. All right, so here's the deal. It's not really a road. It's more like a path. It's just wide enough for you to fit if you'll stand up straight and you'll face it. Right? The place where you have to walk is about as narrow as a balance beam. Right? Wide enough for you to travel this if you're intentional, but it's not going to be very navigable if you're the kind of person who says, no, I must do things my way. The road to there, the road that leads there is so hard to follow that only a few people find it. All right? Listen, you got to want to walk this path. As you step up to the path, you find that the entrance is more like the beginning of a maze. Right? The walls are higher than you can see over or climb. And that first turn, right, it's almost within reach of where you stand at the beginning. Right? Between you and that first turn stands Jesus. No, He doesn't want to hug you. He's holding a backpack. A really big one, like you would see on somebody who wants to travel across a continent, right? And He's gesturing for you to put into the backpack your life, your marriage and your family, your career and your finances, your dreams, your aspirations, your health, and your freedom. Put them in the bag. The path is too narrow for you to carry all your baggage, and the beam is going to require your focus. The path to life, to God, requires total attention. He says to you, don't worry. All right, I got the backpack. You just need to focus on the path and on my voice. You smile and you squint kind of nervously because you're looking at this going, you know what, I probably can't run this path, but I'm thinking that with all this backpack business, look, I could probably walk this path. Jesus, do you think maybe, could I just handle my own backpack? Because you know how I like to keep my stuff close, right? He looks right at you, and He says, okay, are you ready? And He begins walking backwards in the direction of that first turn. You start to protest because you still think that you can handle the pack. And as He rounds the first corner, the lights go out. As you stand on the beam in the dark, He begins to talk to you in this firm, confident voice, and He says, just one step at a time. If you'll just focus on my voice, you'll always know where I am and where to go. At any time, you can turn on the lights again. And you can take your stuff back out of the pack, but when you do, you're always going to find yourself back at the beginning. Because anyone who loves father or mother, son or daughter, husband or wife, dream, aspiration, goal, career, more than me is not worthy of me or this trip. And besides, You can't carry all that baggage and expect to follow me where I want to lead you. All right, but it's your choice. All right, look, just put your stuff in the bag and let me carry it. Follow me with all of your attention or don't. Can you put into the pack your life, your marriage and your family, your career and your finances? Can you put your health and your freedom in the pack and walk away? Do you think that doing this doesn't take some real effort to do it authentically? Do you think that's a sweat-free exercise? If God chooses to take some, forget that. If God chooses to take all of those factors away and relieve you of your control, all right, would you still have an attitude of gratefulness and a willingness to follow Him no matter where He leads? Will you turn on the lights, or will you just decide to follow on the beam in the dark to His voice? You see, this is submitting in worship. Oh, it's so easy to sing the songs of Sunday morning. But will you still have that attitude, the one you just said you had in the song? Will you still have that when God decides to start taking some of those blessings of your life and giving them to somebody else? Relinquishing these factors of your life authentically and backing away is a tune of a completely different nature, isn't it? If I am unwilling to relinquish everything that I never deserved to get in the first place, if I respond bitterly and resentfully when they're no longer available, then I am nothing more than a selfish, ungrateful fraud. If we are not coming out of worship, both corporately and personally, feeling it physically at some level, we are not submitting completely and worshiping authentically from our hearts. We got to leave the light switch alone. We got to leave the stuff in the bag, and we got to choose to start walking the beam that so many other people have already proven that they won't. As I began learning this process of surrendering voluntarily this life that God has built around me, and the perspective I have of how difficult that could make things, all right, this is a very relative perspective, all right, because I could lose it all. In a hot, flat second, it could all go. My family, gone. The house, the luxuries, the toys, gone. Food, clothes, money, everything, gone. And if I lost it all that fast, from my relative perspective, it would be a tragedy. But the truth is, relative to millions of people across the planet, I would just begin living their everyday life. Why should I begin to believe for 1 second that I should get any credit for not indignantly clinging to the stuff that so many people have never even had? Why should I even begin patting myself on the back for not selfishly hanging on to all I never did deserve? Do you see what I'm saying? Look, this got me thinking to a whole different level. I started wondering about the aspects of other people's lives that I have never had to endure. I have never feared for my life. I have never had to run from somebody who hated me because of the color of my skin. I have never experienced physical harm or even a threat of harm because of the God that I serve. I don't know the pain of hunger for weeks, not even days. I've never wondered where my next meal comes from. I've never slept in the street. I've never been kicked out of my house and forced to beg somebody for a place to stay. I have never been physically, forcefully violated. I have never contracted a fatal condition or even a potentially fatal condition. I have never been a prisoner. I don't know what it's like to spend life in a wheelchair. I don't know what it's like to be blind or to navigate life without a limb. I've never even known what it's like to have to depend on public transportation. I've never had such concern over my children's safety because their car seats were just broken and I didn't know if they'd work. I've never depended on food stamps. I've never buried a spouse or a child, but people do every day somewhere. Are you getting the idea here? God's intentional hand has blessed my life and yours too. And He's protected us from this stuff that has happened That's commonplace in people's lives all over the world. Some of them have experienced more than one of these in their life. Look, it's time. It's time to redefine our relativity, our subjective perspective, and start moving through this world with a mission, determined to fulfill some needs in people's lives instead of working so hard to fulfill dreams in our own. I'm not saying that you shouldn't have a bucket list, all right? I'm not. God has great plans for your life. He desires to bless and to protect you, even promises to do so relative to your obedience. All right, but there's nothing wrong with dreaming of a time when you might have some unexperienced experience. But listen, I am more convinced than ever right now that in addition to our bucket lists, we need to have a picture list. This is a list of all the things that we have never had to experience or endure, so we can find somebody who is and pour into them. Get it? A picture list? All right, what would happen? What might happen if we were to use and to put as much dedication and as much emotion and passion into pouring out of our pitchers as we do filling our buckets? What if we started? What if we just began today? Looking not for another occurrence to perpetuate our legacy, but for an opportunity to improve the existence of someone in need, an existence that we would consider a tragedy if it suddenly became ours. What is it you have never had to endure? Maybe you've gone through one or more of the things off of my list, but there are things that you have never had to endure, that other people have, that other people are right now. How will you let relativity color this for you? Will you let it affect you and move you? All right, because it would be so much easier just to sweep it under the rug. All right, just open the door, kick it out the back, and then continue on plodding through, addressing our obligations and responsibilities. All right, listen, nobody's ever going to argue the logic that it's so much easier and it's so much more fun to add things to the bucket. But I want you to listen to verses 34 to 40 from Matthew chapter 25, just one last time. Then the king will say to those on his right, "Come, you who are blessed by my Father, inherit the kingdom prepared for you from the foundation of the world. For I was hungry, and you gave me something to eat. I was thirsty, and you gave me something to drink. I was a stranger, and you took me in. I was naked, and you clothed me. I was sick, and you took care of me. I was in prison, and you visited me." And then the righteous will say to him, "Lord, when did we see you hungry and feed you, or thirsty and give you something to drink? When did we see you as a stranger and take you in, or see you without clothes and give you clothing? When were you sick? When did we see you in prison or visit you?" And the king will answer them, "I assure you, whatever you did for one of the least of these brothers of mine, you did for me." Will you begin to inventory the things that God has never allowed into your life, and allow that to change the way you view the lives of others around you? All right? Will you let someone else's subjective perspective give you a little appreciation for your current situation, and then let it move you to make a difference in theirs? Are you ready? Are you ready to start giving all that you have for whatever He asks? To give all that you are and everything that He'll ever allow you to be? Are you ready for the daily adventure? Are you willing to put your stuff in the bag, leave the light switch alone, and just follow? All right? If you already are showing up regularly for worship, ask yourself this: what's my perspective? Do I consider this an act of bravery or courage to give up everything for whatever He asks? Or will you begin to ask God Most High, your generous benefactor, the source of everything you have ever known, will you ask Him for the courage to begin investing in the lives of people who are experiencing things that you have never had to endure? Will you change your theory of relativity for His glory and their benefit? Refuse to let your obedience become defective and unproductive, because all it does is follow you around town with your bucket. Tell God how much you appreciate your subjective perspective, by asking Him to show you where you can pour out of your pitcher into somebody else's life to make a difference for them. For I was hungry, and you gave me something to eat. I was thirsty, and you gave me something to drink. I was a stranger, and you took me in. Father, we exalt your name. We don't have the words because we don't even have the understanding of how good you've been to us. So the truth is that because we don't even understand how much you've done and how much we owe you, everything we've got is what we should be willing to give. Nothing less than everything should ever be acceptable. Right now, we've got a really important thing that you've given us here. And we can walk out of here today having nodded our heads and gone, yeah, that's right. And then do nothing different in our lives. Or we can decide that we'd much rather be willing to give up whatever you ask of us, to do whatever brings you glory through our obedience with the remaining days that we have left on this planet. God, help us to see the truth about this life that we live in, this planet, this avatar-type nonsense that's going on here. This is not where we belong, and it's not what we're living for. It's just where we're having to operate. Help us to see, to inventory not only the things that we haven't had to do, but to always have a finger on the days that we've got left going, that's all I've got left. I got one less than yesterday. What will it take? God, what do you want? Everything I've got and everything I am, whatever you'll allow me to be, you tell me, because nothing less than my everything is ever going to be acceptable, because I don't even understand how much I owe you. Father, I ask that you would please let this just sink into our hearts. And as we leave and we go back to our lives today, that you would help us to see in our current situation, our subjective perspective, our norm that has become for us, that you would allow us to see how good we have it, and that you'd give us the courage to begin investing in the lives of those who are experiencing things we have never had to endure. God, we ask all these things for your glory in the name of Jesus Christ.